And finally, I originally in my writing I said 7, but now I'm up to 11. And finally, the ubiquitous internet. The internet is an unknown musical space, an unknown musical object, an unknown musical concept. And again, Florian pointed out this lacking in Google of not having a Wikipedia for sound, or not having some sort of archive of all of the sounds of the world, something I've always dreamed, I've dreamt of for many, many years. But in any case, I'm going to get back to the internet idea toward the end of my talk. Let me go back to the written words now. I'll just pick up where I ended. Nothing like this multiplicity of diverse practices has been known in the Western world, ever. Nonetheless, this remarkable number of creative explosions has left the so-called new music scene, that is, that which devotes itself to the promotion and curating of contemporary music only, not only with multiple identities, but possibly with no identity at all. The immense generalized influence of the print and electronic media and its commercialization since the early decades of the 20th century, plus the current ubiquitous influence of popular cultures, and moreover, the current digitalization of nearly all music creation and production, has, in the music community, as I've already said, created an identity crisis of expanding proportions, and has left the world of conventionally made, notated, and produced concert music in a state of breathless searching for air and survival. What I'm talking about here is our opera houses, our symphony orchestras, and the entire tradition of Western music, which I said was about 1,000 years old. It's probably older, but those are all theoretical debates. This is still going on, and when I mention the opera and orchestras, I'm not talking about a mere dusty museums. These are living organisms that have a very, very powerful political and social role in our lives, not only in the West, but all over the world now. So this unusual perpetuation, for whatever reason, and there are many, many reasons and many, many theories and books written on the subject, this unusual perpetuation of artistic forms from the past is to be taken into great consideration. But this is now being challenged by what I'm about to talk about. Incidentally, it's obvious that neither Bach nor Mozart nor Beethoven, not even Brahms, whose voice I heard in the library, recorded voice, I said, "Ich bin Herr Dr. Brahms. Ich bin zu, what does he say? I'm about to. Ich bin geradezu ein Impromptu in Re bemol zu spielen." And this, made with some 19th century recording device. An amazing document to hear that as when I was studying music and hearing Herr Dr. Brahms. But nonetheless, none of these composers ever imagined that their music would outlive their lifetime. They only they made the music of their time. And now they're still making the music of our time. But this form of concurrence, this competition, is a very interesting one, and it's especially interesting on the political and economic stage. And Jacques Attali and other writers have much to say about this, as do poor composers like Florian and myself. But let me go on. The conditions, the conditions of music today are in any case unique since through the existing media and the internet. The fact that the music of all peoples, of any place, and any time, and any history, can now be available instantaneously anywhere on this planet, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, is another phenomenon equally remarkable to the fact that the symphonic literature and the ancient literature of the Renaissance and the Middle Ages and before is still contemporary. So along with that fact, we have the fact that now all music of all peoples is instantaneously available all the time. This is another phenomenon that has never, ever been, as far as I know, ascertained in the history of human music. Excuse me, I'm always commenting on my own comments, but this isn't very much stuff. So, as a result, we are literally drowning in music and being suffocated by it, collectively and individually. And if that is not enough, in today's compositional practice, and no longer just that in the West, we have arrived at a stage where perhaps for the first time, musicians, composers, and non-musicians and non-composers both have the tools and inspiration to imagine and create any sound in any sonic combination and sequence for any duration, in any space, physically real, conceptual, or virtual. This means what I'm talking about here is the simple fact that with the electronic tools that we now have, namely our computers, anybody can realize any kind of music anywhere immediately with this little funny instrument here, this computer. It seems, anyway, I don't want to go into that. You can contest me about that later. Given these possibilities, musical creation becomes limitless and liberated beyond any previous revolutionary ideas and practices. On a lighter note, I might say that this complex state of a momentary no common practice, that is, the lack of a common practice, is in fact today's common practice. That is, with all its attending births and destructions, forced cohabitations, perverse sexual and genetic practices, bare economic survival, mass migrations, and endless depressing experimentation. In any case, a few sonic masters emerge as recognized heroes and inspiring mentors, as do legions of groupies, charlatans, and downright bums. This notwithstanding, the music I speak of remains partially marginalized, and consistently unpopular, but very much alive. When confronted with all the other musics competing for similar cultural and economic space. This, in my opinion, is the state of affairs for what I call experimental music. Some simply call it new music, and that this state of totally liberated music, the one I've just described, the one we're living in right this moment, with its resultant anarchic democracy or democratic anarchy, can and does enable anyone, with or without any musical or technical training, to make music professionally, in the old and conventional meaning of this word, that is, as a means of livelihood. This predictably presents us with a permanently expanding field of permanent chaos and ecstasy of individuals and groups seeking some form of recognition and at best an out-of-body experience. A sonic transcendental voyage. Because what sound can do, and in my opinion, because this is what sound can do, and in my opinion, why people make music, namely to get outside of their psychophysical state. Certainly the church knew this very well, and so did the hippies in the 60s, and even those today. But in this situation, the highly charged atmosphere surrounding this somewhat unstable condition is itself no longer conditioned by the limits of terrestrial space, or for that matter, by the limits of human psychology or physiology. Namely, that music today, in some forms, is challenging the very limits of human physiology, of human psychology, and above all, of virtual and real space. What I'm attempting to describe here is, in somewhat compact words, is what is, in my field and in my experience, happening at this very moment everywhere on this planet. And it is the resultant state of the formerly mentioned revolutions and their combined resultant fallouts. You might say that the current musical situation is a paradox, one of dynamic stasis. That's a paradox. And the outcome, that is, the future, will for most of us never be known. So who am I to talk about the future of music? What we do know, or what we can speculate, is that this unusual and remarkable situation will eventually produce an outcome based on some of the more sturdy elements of the current complex instability. And I am convinced that would I be able to hear the music of 2100, I would surely recognize some remaining detritus, that is, some fallout, some ash, in its melodic genetic codes and in its songs. Thanks. That's part one.